became. And before someone comes on the comments and says that this is mean because so many people will lose their jobs and blah blah blah, know this beforehand. I don't care. This isn't a poor little studio, victim of their surroundings or a victim to extraordinary circumstances out of their control within the industry. There is no gaming industry crash going on right now. The industry itself records massive growth over the last decade. There are more and more gamers hungry for good content every year. It's just that companies like Ubisoft are simply choosing to commit mistake after mistake after mistake, despite constant lesson after lesson after lesson of what it is that we want as the paying customers and what it is that we do not want. This is a company that made its own bed, filled it with parasites, and nurtured an unworkable work environment that placed the actual development and quality standard of their video games in like 10th place down the list of their priorities, while prioritizing a bunch of useless, baseless Californian shit for narcissists who don't even care about game development to begin with, but who couldn't find a spot for themselves anywhere else that actually mattered. So they went on to playing pretend in companies like Ubisoft and many others, while making a lot of money doing nothing. We see Sony and consequently all of their studios going down the same road. We see Microsoft in the same position. We see Square Enix constantly trying to cover their own ass with this stuff too. We see EA not giving a fuck about what's being done with Dragon Age Veilguard right now, turning it into something barely recognizable to its own audience. Hell, we even see CD Projekt Red, the last fucking company that I ever expected to see going down this road, fall victim to the same parasitical shit that, if left unchecked, will spell their end, just as it has with Ubisoft. It is their choices that leads down these paths. Their choices to spend money and resources on garbage like this, rather than focusing on making good games. So no, if anyone asks, I don't care. I couldn't care less, even for the words of this Stevie Chassard. First and foremost, fuck off. You're a monetization director. You shouldn't even be talking all this talk, acting like you're so above it all, so virtuous and morally superior, when you're the type of guy whose job it is to fuck consumers' wallets, shoving predatory monetization through cut content and lazy reskins, and even recallers, sold at prices as high as $8, or other randomly assorted garbage in other Ubisoft games, like season passes on top of season passes. I'll talk about all of this shit in another separate video. This would get way too long if I laid out everything I think of Ubisoft. Point is, Stevie, you should be ashamed for a lot of things, but not for being part of a community that is being vocal about what they like and what they don't like. The games your company made sucked, in part thanks to you, by the way, Monsieur Monetisation. You have no moral high ground, you have nothing to defend. The games, mediocre. The president, incompetent. The higher-ups, parasites. The culture within, toxic and focused on all the wrong things. Only people I feel sorry about are those types of developers who speak out against these kinds of things, like the ones who spoke to Legendary Drops. Developers who just wanted to make good games, but instead were met with a ridiculous work environment, terrible quality control, and a complete disregard for the medium itself. Personally, I would be ashamed of all of that instead. Ashamed of working at a company where an exclamation mark or the lack of a fucking emoji is enough to get someone called into a meeting with HR. But hey, that's just me. Best of luck to you in your future endeavors, coming up with ways to stick it to the paying customers, Stevie. I got some great ideas for monetization, by the way. Feel free to contact me on my business email on screen right now. I wish I could have ended this on a lighter note, I really do, but, well, it's a terrible day for rain. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, do consider liking and subscribing for more. It would really help me out. And if you have any thoughts on this matter or suggestions or anything else, I'll be hanging out in the comments. Have a good day, and I'll see you on the next one.
You've made a wise acquisition.
I will deliver your order personally.
We must act. So shall it be. We sensed your presence.
Control group created.
People have wanted me to watch this for a while. Apparently there's been
Implicitly
some Ubisoft devs that have
unleash
talked
our wrath.
behind the
Unity's
scenes
will be
about
done.
how things are going. And it doesn't seem like it's very good.
We sensed
Things at
your
Ubisoft
presence.
are far worse than
Yeah.
I ever could have imagined. After my last video chronicling the rise and fall of Ubisoft, I had both
watched it.
current
Unleash
and
our
former
wrath.
Ubisoft developers reach out for comment.
Of course they did.
Today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about the issues that the studios face today from the perspective of their own employees.
Oh, boy.
Everything from
At
Me Too movement
last.
allegations to agenda-driven content.
Well, it wasn't a
does the
Me Too
Unity
movement
will?
allegation. Ubisoft went through an
Vengeance is a
entire
cruel
lawsuit
mistress.
process because of that.
What now, Commander?
I want to
Control
contrast
group created.
the comments made in these interviews with what we've seen from
Vengeance shall be
Assassin's Creed
ours.
Shadows and Star Wars
Show
Outlaws.
no mercy.
This company has a deep-rooted
Vengeance shall be
leadership
ours.
issue, going as far to think
Your
that the vast
suffering
majority of
begins
online
now.
criticism is just a
Show no
toxic
mercy.
minority of gamers.
Of course.
Your
This
suffering
company and
begins
its leadership
now.
think that they are on the righteous
Implicitly.
path.
Vengeance
Little do
shall
they
be
know.
ours.
It's a dead end.
Shields
I
Control group created.
that sounds so stupid, but I believe it. And the reason why
Tell
I
us what
believe
to
it is
do.
because the CEO cited critic reviews for their games as a barometer for what the game's reception
Unleash
was.
our wrath.
Like, I don't
Power is
want to believe
reached.
this, but I feel like I have to.
You may
Assassin's
speak.
Creed Shadows has been steeped
The
in
Unities
controversy
will
and
be
criticism
done.
since its initial
We are
reveal.
severely
Online discourse
crippled.
surrounding the game has been almost entirely negative, with long-term fans of the franchise,
Yeah.
general
Is the
audiences,
Unity
and
with us?
Japanese audiences up in
Do not
arms over the
abandon
creative
me.
liberties
The
that
Unity
Ubisoft has taken
senses
with
that
the
an enemy
has
traditional
finished
Yasuke,
its
the
powerful
faithful Black
worship.
Samurai, and feudal Japan. Japanese creators, as well as just random bystanders, have taken to Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube and Reddit, voicing their concerns offended by the
We
game's
must
representation
act.
of their history
They're
and
through
culture.
our shields.
Inaccuracies like using
Control
Chinese
created.
architecture instead of Japanese,
what
the
to do.
legitimacy and relevance of the
Honor is
game's protagonist
compromised. We
Yasuke,
won't
and
last
even
long.
going as far as stealing a flag and imagery from the Sekihara Teppotai, a historical reenactment group where the company
does
had to
the Unity
formally
will?
apologize for not asking
Unleash
for
our
permission to use their
wrath. They're through our
materials.
shields. Our time has come.
White people just never stop colonizing. It's just what we
What
do.
does the Unity will?
Yeah, bro, we just can't help ourselves. We just can't stop.
Show no mercy.
We have to keep doing
Vengeance
it.
shall be ours. Your
This
Oh my
adventure in
God.
Japanese
now.
history has been a complete disaster, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
On September 11th of 2024, an article was penned by the New York Times titled "The Fight Over a Black Samurai in Assassin's Creed." The writer, Zachary Small, misrepresents the controversy and player concerns as merely those of a toxic minority of angry Western gamers, and the entire time he fixates on the race of Yasuke and not the broader implications at play in Ubisoft's mishandling and the frank
Control group
disrespect for
created.
Japanese culture and history. This article was a collaboration between Ubisoft and the New York Times in an attempt to redirect the discussions surrounding Assassin's Creed Shadows and minimize the
This
feedback.
is
The writer
justice.
spoke with Kazuma
This
Hashimoto, a
is
consultant and
justice.
translator for the games industry,
Divine
later to be found out to
vengeance.
be an employee of Sweet
This
Baby
is
Incorporated that
justice.
did consultant work
This
for
is
Ubisoft.
justice.
But
There's no bias. There's no agenda here at all, guys. Yeah, they're just reporting the facts.
Hashimoto claimed
Uh-huh.
that it was people in the West who were upset with seeing Yasuke as a samurai,
Uh-huh.
and
Our
that
time has
many of
come.
the online negative
Shields
comments
down!
were written in Japanese
Vengeance
appeared to
is
be
at hand.
roughly translated from
What
English.
does the Unity
Effective-
will?
True.
Control group created.
Actually true.
Control group created.
And this is what journalists
Defilers
excel
encroach
at.
upon us.
Journalists
This
excel at
is
telling
justice.
half-truths, but focusing on the lie.
hand-waving the increasingly loud and valid concerns of the Japanese, asserting that it's all made-up outrage. Nothing more than the gamers' war against DEI or inclusivity in video games. I find it all too poetic
This
and
is
predictable for a
justice.
AAA publisher to brush off player concerns and use their connections in the media to try to steer public
Control
discourse and
group
sentiment
created.
into a favorable
I am
direction.
listening, my
All of
friend.
these claims made by the New York Times as well as other writers are
Order is
patently
received.
false. You can see
The problem is that I think this is a big issue, is that like traditional like print media is losing a lot of
Let
its
the
relevance,
bidding commence.
and I think it's accelerating that loss. And I think that really like they're getting
We sense
like
your
they're
presence.
getting eaten from
The
like so
Unity
many different
senses that an enemy
perspectives.
has finished
Like
a
for
powerful
example,
worship.
people's literacy levels and ability to read
Unleash our
information, I think,
wrath.
is going down.
Our voices
Like, people
speak
are
as
just
one.
bad at reading now.
We're
They
crippled
can't
and
read.
defenseless.
And not only can they not read, but even if they could read, they don't have the attention
Vengeance
span
is a cruel
to
mistress.
even want to read.
We sensed your
So
presence.
basically, they don't give a shit. Kids barely speak nowadays. Exactly. So you have like a lower amount of people that you can reach fundamentally, right? Because of that. And then you also have the issue where people are so radicalized about ideologies that they're unwilling to like listen to anything other than like what they've already heard. And I think that you put all of these problems together,
Control group
and guess what
created.
you have? You have an audience of people, and then also, of course, like the media is, of course, like misrepresenting things. And I think that also one of the big problems the internet has presented for the media is that, like, you know, in the year 1985, the channels of
Unfortunately,
broadcast
the auction
were
slipped
very
from your
limited.
grasp.
And so you couldn't really have a real contrary opinion because so many of these channels were monopolized by billion-dollar forces. But now on the internet, you can see things like WikiLeaks and stuff like that
We sensed
that
your
can hold
presence.
big corporations
Civilian
and big
structure
entities
complete.
accountable in ways that they can't control. And I think this can be as big as something like WikiLeaks, or it can be in as little as something like this video game. And ultimately, that has done more to damage the credibility of print media than anything else. Because it's shown that print media is oftentimes used as a tool for these organizations to maintain their power structure.
We are
The
ready.
criticisms of Ubisoft's recent releases and the future release in Assassin's Creed Shadows everywhere. It's impossible to ignore. Videos and promotional material ratioed by dislikes and comments in mass
must
numbers. Videos
act.
like mine and many others reaching widespread appeal because we have that many people that agree or share
Yeah.
similar opinions. With that said, I couldn't imagine that it
I
was
think also it's that he brings up a very good point that seems very stupid and face value, but I think it's incredibly accurate, is that when you see videos that are extremely successful and get tons of views that agree with you, it makes people
Control
think that they're
group
not
created.
crazy and that their opinions are valid. I think that's the reason why
Control
YouTube
group
removed the
created.
dislike bar, because the dislike bar was used against things that, you know, I would say brands didn't want to
Vengeance
see
is a
happen.
cruel mistress.
Like, because if you see, oh, everybody else hates this, how many of you guys have ever read an article or done something and like you think the article's awful, and then the main top comment is saying exactly what
Production
you
of
think,
the item
and it's
is
like, yes, thank
complete.
God I'm not crazy. Have you guys ever had this happen? Yeah, the dislike bar
This
hurt
is
tutorials though. No, it
justice.
did, but it hurt everything. Right, exactly. And so we have this happen a lot, and I think what the outcome of that is that people are able to see that the like mainstream, I guess you could say, quote, narrative is not really the mainstream. It's just the most pushed.
We have cleansed the
possible for
planet of
anyone to ignore
heathens.
this level of feedback, and
Yeah.
Ubisoft has to be seeing it. So I spoke with a few developers from Ubisoft to shed some light on these issues. I started off by asking how Ubisoft internalizes and discusses
Yeah.
general criticism from players and the rest of the industry, whether that's its repetitive design, agenda-driven content, or predictable
Another
games.
planet joins the Unity.
They responded saying, at a high level, they rarely talk about it. At a project level, they brush it off as toxic gamer talk. As Anthony Gold
We
Uh-oh.
are ready.
correctly pointed out in a video of his, Ubisoft is
We
filled with
await your
toxic
command.
positivity that prevents any growth.
We are ready.
How about that?
Whatever the Unity wills.
How about that? That's crazy. People always wonder, why is it that everybody watches me? This is the reason why. It's because I've been fucking right. Yeah, I've been right. That's why. And also, by the way, I don't think that I'm being totally honest. I actually don't think that I'm like incredibly intelligent. But what I think that I do have is I have an insanely good memory, and I can make decisions on things based off of more factors than the average person can.
We
And because
sensed
of
your
that,
presence.
if I see something like this, I can think of more things in
We
the past,
must
like,
be
oh yeah,
vigilant.
this,
If it
another
can
thing.
be done,
I put all that together,
must
and I'm like, yeah,
act.
this makes sense. But this is why people watch the videos.
Mining
ego going
upgrade
up.
complete.
It is. Absolutely, but I
Production
was
of the
right.
item is complete.
I then asked, what about the Japanese
Upgrade
community's
logistics to
backlash
unlock
over
more
Assassin's
civilian
Creed Shadows?
slots.
It's obvious that they haven't
Yeah.
done their research, and even the smallest details are going to be noticed by a culture that's as proud as the Japanese.
Of course.
They responded by saying that the criticisms haven't been talked about, and they've only issued demands that we mustn't engage with discussion on that topic publicly.
Just don't talk about it. Problem
Civilian
solved.
structure complete.
Meaning everything that we've said up until this point, all the criticism that we've had over the years for Ubisoft games, even
Yeah.
that of the industry itself, has fallen on deaf ears. I don't know
Permanent
if
item
it's
ready.
sad or if
Civilian
it's somewhat,
structure
yeah, no,
complete.
it's somewhat cathartic to have that validated. I mean, it's the main
Well, it's
complaint.
Fires
obvious. I mean,
encroach
again,
upon
like you
us.
don't have to be a fucking genius to admit this or to acknowledge this. I feel like, again, you know, in the line,
What does the
in the
Unity
land of the
will?
blind, the
Our
one-eyed
time has
man is
come.
king.
The
I
Unity's
feel like
will
that's
be
how I
done.
feel a lot of times saying this stuff.
We await your command.
I don't think this is any sort of fucking revelation. This isn't any sort of like, wow, this is some divine insight that's brought to me in a dream. No, it's common fucking sense this would happen. Of course.
That the vast majority of gamers have had over the years, which is that these
What
companies
can I
aren't
fix
listening
for
to us.
you?
In this case, I have developers that are telling me,
We sensed
yeah,
your presence.
they're not listening to you.
Of course.
One, because
You
they
may
don't want to take
seek.
criticism, and two, because they
Hostility
don't know how to
research complete.
differentiate bad from
Civilian
good criticism.
structure
I think this
complete.
is my patented
What does the
catchphrase by
Unity
now, but
will?
when you have this
Production
much
of the
negative
item
discourse
is
surrounding your
complete.
games, you need to be
Mining upgrade
listening,
complete.
regardless of whether or not
Our
it's
time
good or
has
bad
come.
feedback in your eyes,
Civilian
regardless if you
structure
align with
complete.
these people's political
may
beliefs or
speak.
social political beliefs.
This
Our
is a
voices
problem that a
speak
lot
as
of artists
one.
have. And it's a
Whatever
problem
the
that
Unity
I think that
wills.
artists that are trying to exist in a commercial space have. Because a lot of artists believe in the moral good of whatever art they're making. Like very few artists believe that they're actually like morally bad people. And so because they think that they're doing a good thing, well, they view anybody who's criticizing them as a morally bad person. I think that's what happens the most. Is it arrogance? Well, it's arrogance, but like it's a simplification. What I'm saying is that artists view their art as a expression of themselves. And in the process of them feeling it like
Unleash
an
our
expression of
wrath.
themselves,
Commerce
they
upgrade
take
complete.
criticism against it
At
personally,
last.
and it's
Production
why
of
they
the
have a
item
harder
is
time
complete.
listening to feedback and
Whatever
criticism.
the Unity wills.
Whatever it might be.
Civilian
None
structure
of that matters.
complete.
When you have your
Planet
games
item ready.
on fire as much
Vengeance
as
is a
Ubisoft games have been
cruel
lately,
mistress.
you need to put those fires out somehow. And the only way that you can do that is
We
by
must
listening to them
act. Yeah, of
course.
and implementing whatever feedback you possibly can into your
Our
games to
time
make
has
them
come.
better.
Control group created.
Regardless, the other thing is,
Implicitly.
I'm sorry. I am sick of, I am disgusted by the
We
blatant
await your command.
feigned virtue over how much they care about Japanese culture and history. I'm sorry. You are bastardizing Japanese culture
Harmony
and history
research
for profit.
complete.
That
We are ready.
As I said, bro, like we're white people, right?
Our
This is
will
what we do.
is transcendent.
We take over somebody's culture, we change it, and then we say, "Thank God for us. We've saved you. We've saved
We
you
must
from yourself."
act.
Logistics upgrade complete.
This is what we do. We've been doing it for a really long time, and it's just happening again.
We are entertaining.
That's what you're
offers.
trying to do here. You're not trying to make a history piece. We know
Whatever
that
the
it's
Unity
loosely based on,
wills.
very loosely based on Japanese culture and history. Look at you guys. You put out a Torii Gate figurine, a half Torii Gate figurine with your characters
Production
on
of the
it, without
item is
knowing the
complete.
cultural relevance of
We
the half
must
Torii Gate.
act.
After
Got
Hiroshima
destroyed in World War II.
and Nagasaki, do you have any idea what that means to these people?
They use Tectone as a consultant for this.
What's wrong with you? At the end of the day, it all comes down to
Desecrators
leadership.
assault
It's actually
our
very
world.
easy to understand what's wrong with them. There are people that are bored. They have a tremendous sense of internalized guilt.
Moving into phase
And they
space.
think by doing this kind of
So
stuff,
shall
they're
it
being a
be.
good person.
Our shields are offline.
Once you understand that most people's actions are only taken in order to make themselves feel better
may
or to
speak.
serve some personal
Control
goal,
group created.
then as soon as you
Our
figure that
thoughts
out
are
and you
one.
start operating under that pretense, everything else that a person does makes immediate sense.
Armor
Capega,
Only
I'm
the
helping. Yeah,
unity
exactly.
can save
It's
us now.
self-righteousness. Exactly it is.
Implicitly.
When you look at
Logistics
Ubisoft's
upgrade
messaging, the
complete.
lackluster delivery of
Harmony
titles like
research
X
complete.
Defiant and Star Wars
Another
Outlaws,
bidder has
the inaccuracies
claimed
and
the
screw-ups with
auction.
Assassin's Creed
Hostility
Shadows,
research
you see a
complete.
developer that has no clear
Whatever the
plan or
Unity
vision
wills.
for what players want, what good games look like, or how to even do their job. I took the time to talk to the Ubisoft
What does
developers
the
about
Unity will?
workplace culture,
Control
about the
group created.
initiative that
Uh-oh.
they've taken for
So
diversity
shall it
hiring, and
be.
what happens behind the scenes at Ubisoft. And it's wild to see how accurate some of the assumptions that have been made by myself and others. Now, continuing my conversation with one of the developers, I
Our
wanted to find more
thoughts are
about the
one.
workplace structure and
Vengeance
management.
shall be
And
ours.
seeing as though the company has had initiatives that have been put in place to make the workplace a little bit more diverse, I asked, what benefits have you seen? Is there more diversity in thought, or is it creating a more one-sided environment? They said that so far the initiative hasn't had any impact on the team that I'm a part of. However, it's clear that some topics
Show
are
no
taboo.
mercy.
Right.
What happened is now that people
Your
end up
suffering
in a meeting
begins
with
now.
HR for trivial
Planet
stuff,
item
not
ready.
adding smiley faces
Production
to a
of the
message or
item is
adding an
complete.
exclamation point at the end of a message because some people are reporting it for harassment.
I could easily believe this. 100%. Yeah, for sure.
One of the things that wasn't in your video is that Ubisoft had some
We must
controvery during
act.
the Me Too period,
Vengeance
letting go
shall
of
be
a manager
ours.
in high
Yes.
positions,
Logistics
and
upgrade
some left on their
complete.
own because they knew they'd be discovered. I then asked, what was the impact of this in the workplace? They responded by saying the editorial direction and overall mindset shifted from the boys club to safe content, reaching for
Is this a video about Blizzard or Ubisoft? Wait a minute.
We sensed
Hold
your
up.
presence.
What's
Control group
this?
created.
Vengeance
plain
shall
characters
be ours.
like Kay in
Yeah.
Star Wars is a
Control
perfect
group
example of this.
created.
The idea to have
Show
beautiful
no
characters
mercy.
such as Baldur's Gate
Civilian
or
structure
Uncharted
complete.
is met with distrust.
Vengeance shall
The
be
developer shared
ours.
sentiment saying that safe content also leads to limited opportunities on the gameplay side. Even for Star Wars, we had to
Civilian
work with
structure
Disney, which would
complete.
shut down most attempts at depicting a true criminal underworld with cruelty and drama.
Naturally.
When you put this developer's perspective in line with the recent failures and controversies at Ubisoft or any AAA developer,
So
Hostility
they're
research
basically
tier
implying
complete.
that they probably would have gone
Vengeance is a cruel
farther
mistress.
with Star Wars Outlaw.
We must
But
act.
Control group
They
created.
weren't able to because of Disney. I immediately believe that. I do. I think that makes so much sense. Yeah, probably true.
at this point, it all makes sense. An
Production of the
overcorrection and
item is
sensitivity brought
complete.
on
To
by
me,
the
by the way, seems
We
crazy
sensed your
because didn't
presence.
Disney owns
Vengeance shall
Marvel,
be
right?
ours.
Like Thanos is probably one of the greatest gray area characters that we've ever had. At least in like recent like superheroes. I think he's probably one of the best, if not
We
the
must
best, like
act.
superhero cinema, like gray
Implicitly.
area character. I mean, what the fuck? Like why
Your
not do that
suffering
with Star
begins
Wars?
now.
boys club days that many studios experienced during their early years. As such, many games today lack the teeth and grit that players crave because those things are seen as problematic or unsafe to make in the workplace.
Well,
Don't
the
you
problem also is that you have a workplace that's trying to overcorrect for past
So shall it be.
past sins. So, like for example, they're trying
Vengeance
to
shall be ours.
overcorrect for the fact that they
Vengeance
got
shall
this
be
whole Me
ours.
Too problem in their
Show
company
no
because they
mercy.
had weirdos that were working
Your
there.
suffering begins
So now it's effectively the players that have to play a worse version of a product
Our shields are
because
offline.
the company had some
Control
sort of internal
created.
problem.
We are ready.
use emojis or exclamation points? You could offend someone. Holy shit.
Yeah.
How soft have we gotten? It
Well,
reminds
it's
me of the
also like that's like a huge like
Insufficient metal.
that's like a
We
huge
must
indicator.
act.
It's like if
Severe
people are
damage
getting called
sustained.
into
All
HR for
systems are
not using
failing.
smiley faces or using exclamation marks, think about how painful all the rest of the office experience must be. Because it's not like this, oh, this is the only manifestation of this degree of
Call the
mental
shot.
illness. Absolutely
Control
not.
group created.
It's probably everywhere.
time where the Helldivers 2 community manager
Whatever
went on
the
a
Unity
ban spree on their
wills.
Discord because players were using a throw-up emoji on furry art that was posted in their Discord.
By the way, this is actually true. Helldivers let a moderator on
We
their
must
Discord
act.
ban people because
Production
they
of the
thought that
item is
furry art was
complete.
disgusting. It's probably
does the
like the
Unity
most
will?
retarded thing that I had seen that company do.
Control group created.
Implicitly.
Insane. And they didn't like, because if it was me, right, I would have just
Control
banned the
group
dev and been
created.
like, okay, you're not gonna, this isn't your platform to talk about furry porn. Get out of here. Right, it's disgusting, yeah, but they let it happen. And as far as I know, this person's still a moderator. Yeah, it's insane that you would even allow that to happen.
Sometimes people need to be offended. Well, I'm going to try to
Whatever the
resist the
Unity
pull yourself up by your
wills.
bootstraps tirade. Friction
Well,
on
the
some
problem, I think here's the problem. The problem is that there's a lot of reasonable people who try to meet people like that in the middle, and they try to be reasonable with them. But the problem is that these people are not reasonable to begin with. So they're like obnoxious. They have like these weird values. You can't meet these people in the middle because they're never going to be in the middle. They're mentally ill weirdos.
levels is necessary in life. Now, that doesn't mean that people should be allowed to openly
What
harass
does the
others,
Unity
but there are
will?
major issues that
Defilers
arise when you have
encroach upon us.
emojis that can get you fired. This
True.
overreaction and overcorrection leads to a workplace that is actively hostile towards freedom of thought, expression, and criticism.
Of course. Yeah, because you have people, and this is the
Implicitly,
reason why
the
people
hour
do
of
this.
your death
They also
is
complain to
now.
HR. I think that
Our
people probably
thoughts are
complain like
one.
this because it
Divine
guarantees a degree of job
vengeance.
security. Because like in their
Implicitly.
mind, they're thinking, well, if I'm having all these problems at the company is going to be less likely to get rid of me because maybe they could have some kind of lawsuit or discrimination against themselves. You see what I'm saying? So like there's all
We
of these
must
like
act.
metagaming things that are
Control
happening.
group created.
As one of the interviewees mentioned earlier, they noticed a culture of toxic positivity. From my perspective, toxic positivity is fake people saying fake things, and in the case of Ubisoft, making fake products. Nobody wants to live their entire life
This
being
is
terrified that
justice.
someone is going to misunderstand them.
Yeah.
And when you're at a studio
All
like
shall join the
Ubisoft, and you're not
Unity
even
in
allowed to
time.
make characters attractive, otherwise it might upset people at the studio,
Civilian
you have
structure
a problem.
complete.
This culture of fear and forced uniformity stifles
Well, the problem, so like here's a good example of it, right? Is if like they want to add in
Research rate
like
upgrade
the character,
complete.
like they want to add in like a trans character to the game. Like let's say you want to add in trans character, okay?
Weapons fired up.
How do you think it sounds and how do you think it's received in the office with people that are trying to push this kind of stuff when you say no? Think about that. Now you're the bad guy. Now
Let
you're
the
the one
bidding
who is
commence.
like, now you're transphobic.
Weapons fired
And
up.
these people can risk losing their job. Now you're anti-LGBT. Yeah, exactly. So there's a ton of pressure on people. So once this stuff
time
starts
has
getting put
come.
into the game, there's no way
We
that
have
these companies
cleansed
can
the
push
planet of
back against it
heathens.
because everybody is
This is
afraid of getting
justice.
fired or being mislabeled because they think it's not appropriate for a game. I don't feel safe. Yeah, exactly. Now you're not being inclusive. Exactly.
Vengeance is a cruel
So you can
mistress.
easily see how this happens,
We must
and
act.
it's like basically the
Hostility
problem is
research
only
complete.
allowed to get worse,
Another planet
and
joins
if
the
you try to
Unity.
make it better, you get fired.
creativity innovation. It's no wonder that Ubisoft is struggling to produce anything of real substance when their own developers are walking on eggshells. More worried about HR
Whatever
complaints
the
than creating
Unity
groundbreaking
wills.
games.
And you
How-
shouldn't
must
also get
act.
mad at the developers for
So
not wanting
shall
to do
it
that.
be.
I mean, these
Our
guys, a lot of
thoughts are
them have
one.
been working in the industry for 10 years.
Control group
They're not going to
created.
try to go
Hostility
and,
research complete.
you know, do all this stuff like make themselves look bad. They're not going to fuck up their
No
career
bid.
over some trans
You
character,
missed out.
especially if they're just like a narrative
Implicitly.
designer. Like, you know, they just want to do their job.
You've made a wise acquisition.
I
You
will
make
deliver
bold,
your order
impactful content
personally.
when every
Your
idea is
arguments are
scrutinized
compelling.
for being too
I shall
risky, too
stand with
offensive,
you.
too
Moving
unsafe.
into phase space.
It's a workplace where mediocrity is rewarded, and where pushing boundaries, the very things that games are supposed to do, is seen as a liability. This workplace culture, this overreaction and overcorrection has infected just about every single industry that's out there. I worked in construction for 7 years up until last December, and the company that I worked for was more afraid of HR issues than they were of injuries. We worked with hydrogen sulfide and hydrogen cyanide, gases that, if released, could kill half of a city.
Holy
Our
fuck.
thoughts are
You know, we've
one.
discussed modern audiences, the
Production
mythical,
of the
magical
item
modern
is complete.
audiences, and soft modern
Mining
games.
upgrade complete.
This is a problem, and I think that the big
Implicitly.
issue is that normal people that have like normal opinions
shields
and
are
are
offline.
not insane
Our thoughts
don't
are
speak out
one.
against this enough.
We await your
And
command.
because people like that don't speak out against it, this type of behavior is kind of just allowed to
Witness
get worse,
the unity's
basically.
might. The moment
Found
of
the
our
audience, the
vengeance is
people
at
that are
hand.
running these companies nowadays. You have folks that are
Yeah,
walking
like
around
average
on
people don't push back
eggshells,
enough.
afraid to
May
say
our
anything.
vengeance be
It's
swift.
anecdotal, but just like a few weeks ago or a month ago or so, I remember I was live streaming, and instinctively I
Planet
said
item
something was
ready.
retarded.
Yeah.
I'm a millennial. We all grew up saying it. It's a product of my upbringing. Say what you will. I didn't say it consciously. It just came out. And one of my chatters pops up and says, "How often do you say that word?" I banned the fuck